She was buried in darkness under Ceremony Hall, until Alpha King's instinct dragged him downstairs. No torch dared light the shadows of the underbelly. The rich tapestries and cheerful music above hid a secret world, one forgotten by everyone but the walls themselves. It was here, deep under the marble and stone, that Alara had been buried, not by chance but by a cruel decree no one spoke of. Her cell was small and cold, the air thick with dust and old magic. No sunlight had touched her eyes for years, and still she survived, her spirit stubborn, her mind sharp, and her heart quietly refusing to surrender. She woke as the echo of footsteps traveled above her cell. Her sharp ears caught every subtle movement, the clink of armor, the murmurs of noble voices, the faint scent of sandalwood and iron. Even in darkness she could sense the world outside, but it felt far away, almost unreachable. Her fingers traced the rough edges of the stone wall. She knew the way the shadows shifted. She had memorized every corner of this prison. Still, tonight something was different. A tremor ran through the stone floor, almost like a heartbeat. A presence came closer, and the instinctive chill of fear rose in her chest. Above, Kalen, the Alpha King, stood at the center of the grand ceremony hall. His eyes scanned the crowd, noting smiles and whispers, yet his mind felt an unexpected pull, a silent tug at his very being. He could not explain it. Even the music of the celebration seemed distant. Something beneath the floor called to him, not with words but with a force he had known all his life. Instinct. His hand rested on the hilt of his sword, not for protection from the nobles but in preparation. He had learned to trust this feeling. It never failed. Kalen moved slowly, deliberately, stepping away from the warmth and noise. The polished marble reflected the light of chandeliers, but his gaze stayed downward. There was a place beneath the hall that even he had not explored, a section of stone that seemed different. He followed the feeling, tracing the pull with a precision born of years of command. The whispers in his mind grew sharper, almost urging him forward. A corner of the floor slid open with a quiet hiss, revealing a staircase leading downward. The smell of damp stone and old magic greeted him. He descended, his boots echoing against the cold walls. Alara's eyes widened as she heard the first step. She had felt the shift in the magic, the subtle change that indicated a living presence. Her breath caught. She had been forgotten by everyone above, abandoned in darkness, yet somehow he had found her. She held herself back, tense and wary. No human had come here in years. Many had tried and failed. She would not trust easily, not even the Alpha King whose power seemed to penetrate the walls themselves. When Kalen reached the bottom of the staircase, the air seemed to vibrate with energy. He stopped, sensing her presence before he even saw her. The shadows twisted slightly, as if reluctant to reveal their secret. Then she appeared, a figure emerging from the gloom, her hair dark as midnight and her eyes shining with a fierce light even in the faint torch glow. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice steady but low. "No one is meant to find this place." Kalen's gaze softened, though his expression remained firm. "I am drawn here," he replied simply. "I do not know why, but I felt you." Alara's lips pressed into a thin line. She had heard words like that before, empty promises of help, or worse, threats masked as concern. She took a cautious step back. "Many have felt something," she said. "It did not end well for them." Kalen's eyes darkened with understanding. "I am not like them." His voice carried authority and warmth, and in it was a promise she could not ignore. He stepped closer, careful not to scare her. "Tell me your name." "Alara," she whispered. The word felt strange in her own mouth, like a relic of a life she had almost forgotten. "Then Alara," he said softly, "I will help you." The tension in the air was thick, a silent battle of trust and power. She did not move, but she did not flee. Kalen knelt slightly, lowering himself to her level. "I do not ask for your trust," he said, "only your patience. I will not harm you." She studied him, measuring, weighing the truth in his eyes against the instincts that had kept her alive for so long. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely audible. "The chains, they are not ordinary. You cannot break them with steel." Kaelin's fingers brushed the edge of the stone bars. Indeed, the bindings were carved with ancient runes, glowing faintly in the darkness. He could feel their power pressing back against his own strength. He frowned, realizing this was no ordinary magic. It had been cast to imprison, to suppress, to erase, yet it had failed. "Then we will find another way," he said, determination ringing in his tone. "I do not leave what I am drawn to." Ilara's heart beat faster, not from fear, but from a glimmer of hope she had not felt in years. She could feel his intent, the strength behind it, the certainty that he would not falter. For the first time, she dared to believe that someone, perhaps the first in a lifetime, would not abandon her to the darkness. Kaelin studied the runes carefully. They were delicate, ancient, and malevolent in design. He could feel the magic resisting, almost as if it were alive, reacting to his presence. Yet the pull toward Ilara was stronger than the resistance. His instincts guided his hands over the carvings, testing for weakness, sensing the pulse of the magic beneath. "You feel it too," Ilara said quietly, more to herself than to him. "It recognizes you." Kaelin's gaze snapped to her. "Recognizes me?" "Yes," she whispered, stepping closer, daring to break the small distance between them. "The same bloodline, the same power. That is why it did not kill you. That is why it did not remain hidden." Kaelin's mind raced. He had sensed magic that moved against him before, but never like this. This was personal, deliberate. A force alive with intention, bound to the fate of someone else as someone very real. And now he understood, the world above, the hall, the celebrations, the nobles. They were blind to a danger that had slept for centuries right beneath their feet. He turned back to the runes. "Then we face it together." Ilara's eyes met his. For the first time, a fragile bond formed in the shadows. She wanted to speak, to warn him, to demand he leave. Yet something in him inspired a trust she did not fully understand. Her fingers brushed his arm, a fleeting contact, and even in that small moment sparks of emotion ignited, a mixture of fear, longing, and something deeper, unspoken. The first attempt to break the spell came with a jolt of force. The runes resisted violently, sending a shockwave through the stone floor. Kaelin's hand burned as he pressed again, focused and relentless. Ilara felt the pressure of the magic and instinctively reached out to steady him, not entirely aware of why she moved. Their hands brushed. Both flinched, but neither withdrew. "The magic, it feeds on more than fear," she said. "It senses doubt, hesitation, it feeds on despair. We must be certain or it will consume us." Kaelin's jaw tightened. "Then we are certain." And in that certainty, they became allies, partners against a force older than either had imagined. Shadows writhed around them, whispering, groaning, alive with the memories of pain and rage. Ilara's voice trembled as she spoke the truth she had kept locked inside her heart. "I have waited for someone who could come for me, someone who would not fear the darkness. You are the first." Kaelin's eyes softened, but his resolve never wavered. "Then we move forward together." As they worked, the darkness responded. Shapes shifted and walls seemed to pulse with life. It was as if the very dungeon resented its prisoner being freed. The ancient chains rattled, glowing more fiercely, almost screaming. And then a sound echoed from deep within the shadows, a whispering voice, soft, urgent, speaking Ilara's name in tones both familiar and alien. She froze. "Do you hear that?" Kaelin nodded. "Yes, and I know it is not empty. We are not alone here." Ilara's heart pounded. The shadows were not just a prison. They were sentient, aware, watching, waiting. Yet Kaelin remained calm, his instincts guiding him like a lantern through the pitch of the dungeon. His strength was more than physical. It was an aura of certainty that steadied her trembling hands and racing heart. Minutes stretched into hours as they battled the magic and shadows. And then, finally, With one careful, precise motion, Kalen pressed his palm to the final rune. It shivered, then cracked. A wave of energy exploded outward, throwing them both back, and the glow faded. The chains shattered. Alara fell forward and Kalen caught her, pulling her into his arms. Their faces were close, hearts hammering, breaths mingling in the charged air of the freed dungeon. She looked into his eyes, seeing for the first time a man who could match her strength, match her pain, and perhaps even understand her longing. You saved me," she whispered, still in disbelief. "No," Kalen replied softly, his voice a quiet growl. "You saved yourself. I only followed my instinct." And as their hands intertwined, holding onto each other amidst the remnants of magic and shadow, neither of them noticed the faint movement behind a broken pillar, a shape watching, silent, waiting. The darkness beneath the ceremony hall was no longer just a prison. It was a beginning. The shadows under the ceremony hall had shifted, alive with a silent awareness that both Kalen and Alara could feel. Though the chains were broken, the darkness was not yet tamed. The air trembled with ancient magic, curling around walls and pillars, whispering secrets only the lost and the bold could hear. Alara's breath caught as she followed Kalen deeper into the underbelly. Every step seemed to echo the beating of her own heart, a rhythm entwined with fear, awe, and a strange longing she could not name. Kalen led her through twisting corridors of cold stone, each turn carrying the weight of centuries. He moved with careful authority, yet there was a tension in his movements, a sense that even he could not entirely predict what lay ahead. His instincts had guided him this far, but the deeper they went, the more he realized the dungeon was not a place built for imprisonment alone. It was a living trap, a labyrinth designed to test the courage, will, and purity of those who dared enter. Alara followed silently, her sharp eyes scanning the shadows. Despite the release from her cell, she remained cautious. She had learned to survive by reading the smallest signs, a flicker of movement, a subtle change in the air, a whispered hint of magic. And now, as she walked beside Kalen, she sensed something she had never felt in captivity: protection. It was a feeling so foreign, yet so comforting, that it made her chest ache. She dared to look at him once, taking in the strength etched in his posture, the intensity of his gaze, and the silent promise of his presence. "The shadows, they are aware," she said quietly. "They can feel our fear, our doubt. They will try to separate us if only for a moment." Kalen nodded without looking at her. "Then we cannot give them a moment. Our bond is our shield." She hesitated. "Bond," he turned to her, his eyes piercing yet gentle. "A connection, not of chains, not of fear, but of trust. Without it, we cannot move forward. Are you willing to trust me?" Alara's gaze fell to the ground. Trust had always been a dangerous luxury, one that had cost her dearly. And yet, looking at him, she felt the stirrings of something like hope. "I will try," she whispered. Their journey carried them deeper into the labyrinth, corridors growing narrower, the walls curling inward like a living cage. Whispering voices rose from unseen corners, carrying the echoes of past prisoners, curses, and threats. The shadows played tricks on their senses, distant footsteps that weren't there, glimpses of figures vanishing as quickly as they appeared, walls that seemed to breathe. Yet Kalen remained calm, moving with unshakable purpose. Each time a whisper tried to claw at Alara's mind, he placed a hand on her arm, grounding her. "You must not fear the illusions," he said softly, his voice a steady anchor. "They cannot touch your heart if you do not let them." Alara swallowed hard, following his lead. The path was treacherous, lined with traps of old magic and curses meant to crush the spirit of intruders. At one point, a floor tile gave way under Kalen's weight, but he barely faltered, grabbing the edge and pulling himself up. Alara caught his hand instinctively, their fingers brushing. The contact was brief, yet electric, sending warmth through her chest. She looked away quickly, ashamed of the fluttering inside her, but Kalen's calm, unwavering presence reassured her. Finally, they reached a vast chamber at the heart of the dungeon. The ceiling stretched high, lost in shadow. Strange symbols glimmered faintly on the walls, moving subtly as if alive. A cold wind swept through, carrying whispers that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. And in the center of the room floated a sphere of darkness, thick and writhing, pulsing with malevolent energy. Alara froze. She had seen the prison's chains, but never anything like this. "That," Kalen said, his voice low and steady, "is the source of the curse that held you. The entity bound here is old, older than the throne, older than any king who ruled above. It has fed on fear, doubt, and despair for centuries. It will try to take you, to use you if we do not act carefully." Alara's pulse raced. How do we stop it?" Kalen's eyes softened as he looked at her. "Together, but it will not be easy. It will test every weakness, every fear you have buried." She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the shadows pressing against her. "Then we face it together." The sphere pulsed violently as if aware of their intentions. Shadows stretched from it, curling like fingers toward them. Kalen drew a deep breath, stepping forward to shield her. "Do not be afraid," he said, his presence a wall of warmth against the cold dark. "I will not let it touch you." Alara felt a strange sense of calm at his words, though her heart pounded. The shadows recoiled slightly from him, as if recognizing his strength. Kalen reached out and the sphere pulsed again, reacting to his touch. His instincts told him the entity was measuring them, seeking a weakness. Alara stood beside him, placing her hand on the same airspace, feeling the raw power ripple through her. "It senses us," she whispered. "It knows our connection." Kalen nodded. "Good. Let it know we are united. That is its fear." Together they focused, their combined presence a subtle but powerful force. Slowly the sphere began to contract, writhing less violently. The shadows shrank back into corners, hissing like serpents disturbed. Alara felt her fear melting, replaced by a fierce determination. She had been trapped here for so long, forgotten by the world above, but now she was not alone. "You are stronger than you realize," Kalen said softly, watching her carefully. "Do you feel it?" "The magic recognizes your power too." Alara's eyes widened. I never knew. I thought I was powerless." "No one is powerless," he replied. "Not truly. It is our choices that shape our strength, and you chose to survive." For a moment the chamber was silent except for their breaths and the faint pulsing of the sphere. Then the entity spoke, not in words but in feelings. It pressed against them, testing, probing, threatening. Doubt rose in Alara's mind. Memories of years alone, of despair and hopelessness, tried to claw their way back. The shadows whispered of betrayal, of pain, of fear of being abandoned again. Kalen noticed the change instantly. He stepped closer, placing a hand firmly on her shoulder. "Do not let it control you," he said. "We are stronger than its whispers." Alara's hands trembled. She wanted to resist, to fight the fear, but it was overwhelming. She leaned into him instinctively, feeling the anchor of his presence. In that moment their eyes met, and she saw something in him she had not seen before: vulnerability, trust, and an unspoken understanding. For the first time she felt that someone truly saw her, beyond the prison, beyond the shadows. The connection between them pulsed, almost like a shield, and the entity recoiled. It shrieked, a soundless cry of frustration, as the light of their unity cut through the darkness. The shadows curled away, retreating toward the sphere, which began to shrink, losing the fight against their combined will. Alara felt her heart swell, a mix of awe and a strange, unspoken affection. She had endured so much alone, but now, standing with Kalen, she understood what it meant to have an ally, a protector, someone who believed in her. Kalen's voice broke through her thoughts, gentle but firm. "We are not done. It will return stronger, smarter." "But we have seen its weakness." She nodded, her resolve hardening. "Then we prepare, we face it again." They retreated to a small alcove in the chamber, catching their breaths. Shadows still lingered in the corners, but the worst of the entity's immediate power had been pushed back. Kalen watched her carefully, noting the tension in her shoulders, the way she kept her eyes on the remaining darkness. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You are remarkable," he said quietly. "Do not doubt your strength again." Alara looked at him, a flicker of emotion crossing her features, fear, relief, admiration, and something more she could not name. I will not forget this," she whispered. Kaelin's gaze softened. "Nor should you. Remember, we are stronger together." As they prepared to leave the chamber, a new sound echoed, a low, almost melodic hum that came from deeper within the dungeon. The entity was stirring, reorganizing its power, growing more aware of them and perhaps seeking another way to challenge them. Alara felt a shiver run through her. "It is not finished," she said. "No," Kaelin agreed, "and we must be ready." The shadows beneath the ceremony hall are not merely walls and stone. They are alive, and now they are watching us in a new way. We cannot underestimate them again. He extended his hand to her, not just as a guide, but as a partner. Alara took it, their fingers intertwining, and in that simple act they sealed a silent promise of trust, of courage, and of facing the darkness together. The shadows seemed to pause as if acknowledging their bond before settling back into silence. The underbelly of the palace was no longer just a prison. It was a proving ground, a place where their strength, courage, and hearts would be tested. And somewhere deep in the darkness, the entity whispered again, more cunning than before, promising trials far beyond what they had faced so far. The chamber had grown colder, the shadows stretching long and twisting unnaturally. Kaelin and Alara stood side by side, hearts pounding in unison. The sphere at the center of the room pulsed with an angry energy, dark and alive, almost sentient. The entity within had sensed their unity, their trust, and it was furious. Its whispers grew louder, more insistent, trying to pry at their fears, their doubts, their memories. Alara tightened her grip on Kaelin's hand. "It's testing us," she said, her voice trembling but steady. "It wants to see our weakness." Kaelin nodded, eyes scanning the darkness. "Then we show it there is none, not if we face it together." The shadows shifted, forming shapes that mimicked figures from Alara's past. Faces of those who had abandoned her, voices of threats she had endured, all pressing in, trying to overwhelm her. She stumbled slightly, but Kaelin's steady hand on her shoulder anchored her. "Look at me," he said firmly. "Not them, only me." Her gaze met his, and in that instant the shadows faltered. The entity recoiled at the strength of their connection. Alara felt courage rising in her chest, warmth flowing through her despite the cold that surrounded them. For the first time in years, she felt more than survival. She felt purpose, strength, and a spark of hope that had lain buried for far too long. Kaelin stepped forward, placing himself in front of her. "Together," he said, his voice like iron wrapped in silk. "No fear, no doubt, only us." The sphere pulsed violently, sending waves of dark energy across the chamber. The ground trembled beneath their feet. Shadows reached out like tendrils, clawing, twisting, trying to separate them. But Kaelin did not flinch. He pressed his free hand toward the sphere, his instincts guiding him, his will unwavering. Alara mirrored him, placing her hand beside his. Their energy intertwined, forming a barrier, a shield against the darkness. A shriekless cry echoed from the sphere, deep and resonant, as if the entity was wailing in frustration. The shadows writhed, trying to test their bond again, conjuring illusions of pain, loss, and loneliness. Alara's knees trembled, but Kaelin pulled her closer, holding her steady. "Do not let it control your mind," he said softly. "I am here, always." Alara's heart ached at the words. For so long she had been alone, abandoned to the shadows. But now his presence, unwavering and fierce, reminded her of something she had almost forgotten: trust, companionship, and the possibility of love. She drew a deep breath and faced the illusions. "You do not control me," she whispered. "I am stronger than you." The entity faltered. The sphere pulsed, slower this time, dark energy wavering. The shadows shrank slightly, hissing and curling back toward the core. Kaelin's eyes gleamed with determination. Good, keep your focus, keep your will. Alara nodded, courage flooding through her veins. Together they stepped closer to the sphere. It shimmered violently, almost as if alive, but their connection held unbroken. Kaelin placed both hands on it now, feeling the pull, the resistance, the weight of centuries of anger and pain. Alara placed her hands on his, and together they channeled their energy, not with fear, not with violence, but with intention, unity, and heart. The entity reacted, sending a wave of energy that knocked them both backward. Alara stumbled, but Kaelin caught her without hesitation. Their foreheads touched as they regained balance, breaths mingling, hearts racing in unison. A silent understanding passed between them. This was more than survival. This was a moment of trust, of courage, of connection forged in the deepest shadows. "We are stronger together," Kaelin whispered. Alara's eyes glistened. "I believe it now," she said softly. "We can overcome this together." The sphere pulsed again, violently, but their combined will held firm. Light began to shine faintly from their hands, pure and steady, growing brighter as they poured their energy into the entity. The shadows recoiled, writhing in confusion and fury. Alara felt a warmth spreading from her chest, a power she had never known, a light that seemed to come from her very soul. Kaelin noticed the change immediately. "Your strength, it's extraordinary," he said, awe in his voice. "It complements mine." Alara smiled faintly, determination blazing in her eyes. "We complete each other," she whispered. The sphere's pulses grew irregular, erratic, and then, suddenly, it shivered violently. Shadows lashed out one final time, but Kaelin and Alara did not retreat. Their bond, their trust, and their combined power struck the entity with an unbreakable force. There was a brilliant flash of light, blinding and pure, and the darkness screamed in a soundless roar. When the light faded, the chamber was silent. The shadows lay still, no longer writhing or whispering. The sphere was gone, leaving only faint traces of energy shimmering in the air. The entity had been defeated, or at least tamed. The oppressive weight lifted, and for the first time in what felt like centuries, the dungeon felt quiet, empty, and free. Alara sank to her knees, exhausted but exhilarated. Kaelin knelt beside her, placing a hand gently on her back. "You did it," he said softly. "We did it." Alara shook her head, tears brimming. "No, you helped me." Kaelin smiled faintly, his eyes reflecting pride in something deeper. "We helped each other. That is the truth of it. Alone, we would not have survived. Together, we are unstoppable." For a long moment, they simply sat there, catching their breath, letting the calm of the dungeon settle around them. Alara's gaze softened as she looked at Kaelin, seeing not just the Alpha King, the warrior, or the protector, but a man who had chosen to trust, to fight, and to connect. A man who had seen her fully and had not turned away. I never imagined," she began, her voice low, "that someone could care so deeply, even in a place like this." Kaelin's gaze softened, and he brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. "You are worth caring for, Alara. Never doubt that." Her lips curved in a faint, grateful smile. I think I understand now," she said. "The darkness, it cannot define me, and neither can fear." Kaelin nodded, standing slowly. "Then we leave it behind, step by step, together." They rose, hands still intertwined, and made their way back through the corridors. The dungeon, once oppressive and alive with malevolent energy, seemed subdued, almost peaceful. Shadows clung to the corners faintly like memories, but they no longer threatened. The trial had changed them. Both had grown stronger, braver, and their bond had deepened into something undeniable. As they reached the staircase that led back to the ceremony hall, Alara paused. "Do you think the kingdom above will ever know what happened here?" she asked softly. Kaelin shook his head. "Perhaps not. Some battles are meant to be fought in silence, but we will carry it with us always, and we will be ready if the darkness ever returns." Alara smiled, a mixture of relief and newfound confidence. "Then I am ready. Whatever comes next, I will face it with you." Kaelin's hand tightened around hers. "And I with you, always." Together they ascended the stairs. Light from the chandeliers above filtered down, warm and golden, in sharp contrast to the shadows they had conquered. The ceremony hall bustled with life, music, and laughter, oblivious to the struggle that had unfolded beneath its floors. But Kaelin and Alara emerged changed, stronger, braver, and forever bound by the trials of the dungeon. They reached the top, stepping into the light. Alara paused, glancing around at the grandeur, at the people oblivious to the darkness below. A quiet smile touched her lips. "I never thought I would see the light again, and yet here I am." Kaelin looked at her, his expression a mix of pride, admiration, and something tender, unspoken. "The light was never gone," he said softly. "It was waiting for you, waiting for us." For the first time in her life, Alara felt truly free. Not just from the dungeon, not just from the chains, but from the fear that had shadowed her heart for years. And as she stood beside Kaelin, hand in hand, she understood something she had long forgotten. Hope, courage, and the power of connection could overcome even the deepest darkness. They walked together toward the center of the hall, faces lifted to the light, hearts intertwined. The shadows of the dungeon lingered only as memory, a reminder of what they had endured and conquered. And somewhere in the quiet corners of the palace, a faint whisper of energy remained, soft, watchful, but no longer threatening. The darkness had been challenged, and for now it had been tamed. Alara glanced at Kaelin, feeling a surge of gratitude and something more, a quiet, undeniable affection. "Thank you," she whispered. Kaelin smiled, his eyes warm. "No, thank you, Alara. You taught me what it means to fight, not just for a kingdom but for something far greater, for hope, for trust, for love." Alara felt her heart flutter. The bond between them, forged in the shadows, had transformed into something luminous, something neither fear nor time could destroy. And as they stepped fully into the ceremony hall, leaving the dungeon behind, they knew this was only the beginning. The kingdom above remained unaware, but beneath the marble floors, a story of courage, trust, and love had been written, one that would echo through the shadows for centuries to come.